guy, has done a lot of really interesting study on this. Again, he's a liberal, but an honest one. And he's like, people, when they feel threatened, when things have changed too much, they get really angry and tribal, and they don't trust other people, and civic institutions collapse. And we're seeing this across the country. So there's a huge cost to changing everything up for the benefit of the few. And let me tie that to the first part of your question, which was, you said, in the South, there were raids on chicken plants, Tyson chicken plants. And the INS or ICE or whatever we're calling it now comes in and says, so these people are here illegally without documentation. We're enforcing the law for once. And they couldn't find labor. Well, who is they? Well, they is the chicken plants. They is the employer, okay? And they couldn't find labor because they didn't want to pay market rates to Americans. Yeah. So basically what they're saying is, even though we're in the United States, we're a company in the United States, and by the way, you can say this of Amazon and Walmart for sure, and McDonald's and lots of other big corporations that the right has defended for many years, unfortunately, and now the left defends, bizarrely. They benefit from all the institutions that make business possible. The rule of law, patents, like all the things that we have that other people don't have, okay? And yet they feel like paying the wages of Tegucigalpa. Because why wouldn't they? They're an employer. What bothers me is that no one ever calls them out on it. So like you often hear people say, well, who's gonna pick the lettuce or whatever? And I'm not slagging lettuce pickers. I respect anybody who works with his hands in the sun, of course. But it's not about the picker, it's about his employer. Mm-hmm. So lettuce might cost, $4 a head. Okay. Well, an iPhone costs $1,000 because actually things have cost because they have value, because labor has value, duh. So I guess my question is, when did liberals all become libertarian economists who are lecturing me about the market and how one thing we can't do is get in the way of employers finding the cheapest possible labor? What? When did you start defending this? And the answer, of course, is that big companies figured out the game. And they're like, for a very small price, we can buy the allegiance of the Democratic Party. All we have to do is fund their nonprofits, which they do, but more importantly, make a series of totally hollow symbolic gestures, like here's some new bathrooms, I'm for Black Lives Matter, leave me alone. And they have totally convinced your average college student that they're the cutting edge of the progressive movement. And so you see this really weird thing that always blows my mind. You go into an Apple store, and shamefully, I own Apple products, and you'll walk in and there'll be like some highly educated, kid with 2 degrees from impressive schools with a nose ring, standing in this kind of sad, spare retail space wearing a matching uniform thinking he's part of the revolution. And I'm like, dude, you're working for the richest man in the world. Like, you're just a cog in a machine, you're a tool, actually. And he's like, no, I'm not. I'm picking up, yeah, whatever. But I always think, the level of delusion that they've pulled off convincing the left, don't criticize suicides at Foxconn factories because, hey, we got you on the dumb social issues don't mean anything. And they fall for it. It's hilarious.
So, Tucker might be referring to some corporate Democrats at center, but anybody that watches the Young Turks knows we criticize big business plenty.
Good for you. Good for you.
And so you use the same Apple example. Apple makes a nice phone. I have one, but that doesn't mean they should pay 0% in taxes. And they
exactly. Just amen.
Yes. And so they evade taxes all the time. And if you want to get together and enforce the law against big businesses, I'm right there with you. Okay? So that would be wonderful. That would be a nice change from what we have in the Republican and Democratic Party today. But one more thing on immigration, Tucker. So you say demographic change is scary and can be disconcerting. And I think that a lot of people don't see that. I don't see it. A lot of people in our audience don't see it. And so they wonder why folks are so scared. And so I literally don't know the answer to that. If you're saying crime, it's not crime. As we talked about before, I can give you more stats, 110% increase in immigration since 1980. Crime in the country has gone down 36%. Okay, and in the cities where you have the most undocumented immigrants, you have the least amount of crime. And in fact, studies have taken out other factors, including poverty, and they still see that undocumented immigrants lead to less crime, not higher crime. Okay, so that's just a fact. That's a fact. So then I don't know what you're scared about. And Tucker, look, you're against, as far as I can tell, and correct me if I'm wrong, what you call chain migration, what others call family migration. And so that is, as you acknowledge, the majority of legal migration. You're also against the lottery, and you do the math on that, and you have eliminated 85% of legal immigrants. But the country is massively, as you just stated, in favor of immigration. So if you're against undocumented immigrants and you're against legal immigrants and you cite fear and demography, can you see why people then would be concerned that it's racial and not based on crime or any other legitimate fact?
I guess. I mean, in my case, I mean, I don't want to be defensive or anything. I don't think I really am very defensive, but I don't actually think that there's a real, I mean, look, I sincerely appreciate this because I like an actual adult debate with a smart person about this, but I see that so rarely. Instead, I see people coming to the conversation convinced of their own virtue, and you don't actually, so it's a very simple way to write people off. I'm grateful for a chance to say in public what I really think about the effects of change. I think it's really disconcerting, and let me just make a point that is too rarely made. And that is that if you have a big diverse country like this, 320 million people, no majority of anything, right, in the country, and you're running it, or you're sort of trying to seek and influence people who run it, like you and I are, then you really have to think about, like, what are the most important questions? Do countries hang together just through inertia, just because they do? No, they don't, actually. Countries tend to sort of break apart. They spin out into component parts. It's the story of history. And so what do you need in a country where no overwhelming majority has really anything in common? Well, what you need is a unifying culture, actually. A set of ideas. This is very obvious. This is not like, you know what I mean? This is not applied physics, okay? It's super simple. It's true in your life. If you have, like, nothing in common with your spouse, does it make your marriage stronger? Like, we don't speak the same language. We love each other more. You know, please. It's not true of businesses or military. It's not true of anything because it's just not true. So it's not an insurmountable problem, and this is not the first time we've thought about this in the history of the country. We thought about it a lot during the Progressive Era. What do we all have in common? And at the time we decided, well, we have our founding documents, the Bill of Rights, we have patriotism, we have English. And so those are the three, and I think it's sort of perfectly great set. Maybe you've got other ideas, okay? The point is not what are those things, the question is you must have those things. And if you don't, you're gonna break apart. And maybe not now, but at some point you will, because why wouldn't you? So I would argue that the very idea of multiculturalism is insane as an organizing principle of a country. Not because I'm against, not because I'm against other cultures. My favorite thing is to travel and go to different cultures. I think they're super interesting and a lot of them are great, maybe some better than ours. That's not the point I'm making. I'm saying as an organizing principle of your country, you need to have a common culture. Another word for a collective set of beliefs. And I sincerely think, just based on being a lot of places around the world, that language is a key part of that. And that used to be, you keep referring to our earlier big wave, the industrial wave of immigration that we had. The key thing that we demanded was fluency in English. Key. Not because we were chauvinist. English is not a racial category. It's a language shared by people of all kinds of different countries. It's the language of Nigeria, okay? It's just a language. But language is the thing that holds more than anything else. And ask anybody who grew up in a multilingual country, how about a Canadian, not that far away? What happens when you have competing languages? You have inherently division. This is not, slow down, this is not a Republican or Democrat or right-wing or left-wing issue. It's a total common sense issue that has been obscured for reasons I honestly don't understand, maybe by demagogues on both sides, but it doesn't matter, it's true. So if you're gonna have huge country-changing levels of immigration, and we do, you need to make absolutely certain that everybody of every color and every religion is united in at least something beginning with language. Duh.
I think this goes to the core of the issue, and I think this is a really interesting conversation. And so, look, on English, I might not be as doctrinarian as you think. I came here with not knowing any words. I knew 3 English words. When I was,
how old were you?
I was 8 years old, and I knew yes, no, and girl. That's it. And they threw me into the deep end, and I did not do English as a second language, and you pick it up quickly. And so I get that we have to have a unifying language. India has a unifying language. It's also English. And so I think that there is a reasonable way to do that. I don't think that you have to throw everybody into the deep end, especially if they didn't come at the age of 8. And everybody has a different perspective, and there's a way of easing into that. But when we talk about culture, well, America's culture is not unicultural. It is by definition multicultural. That is our culture. So, I mean, look at all the things that we consider really American. Pizza, Italian, right? Jazz, African American, and I can go on and on, especially in the food category. So, and you famously, Tucker, the other day said that tacos are American and not Mexican.
Yes, they are. That's the point.
Yes.
We brought them in. They're part of American culture now. That's the point.
But Tucker, that's my point. But think about it, Tucker, that we brought all those things in, and they are now part of our multicultural culture.
We're having a debate over word definitions, or perhaps my verbosity has obscured what I'm really trying to say. But what I'm trying to say is, if you have a country, any country, particularly a huge and complex country like ours, where there's no unifying fact, okay? Most countries have, settle down for a second, I'll be right there. Most countries, you know what I mean? Like that is potentially a vulnerability for us. I don't think it needs to be, but we need to address it thoughtfully. You have to have, of course, I'm totally opposed to stamping out anybody's culture. I'm telling anyone what to believe. I'm just saying the very most obvious thing, which you must have something in common with everyone else in your country, or why would you be a country? And if you don't think that, you haven't thought about it very much. That's all I'm saying.
This is a great conversation, and what I love about it is we didn't mention Trump at all. During that. So that's a good indicator that we're getting deeper into the issues here. So I want to just transition to the other big topic I wanted to touch on, and in that last conversation we talked about the role of big business, and Tucker, you've made the point before that, when we're